Empower your leadership journey with the CEO Series. Whether you're at the gym, strolling, or commuting, our impactful dialogues with world-class leaders are just a click away. Immerse yourself in the minds of visionaries shaping today's most influential companies and innovations. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership. Don't miss out. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms.
Happy New Year. Welcome to 2024 and our first series of the CEO Series. Our guest today is Jeff Waldman, who's a good friend of mine. Over 2 decades of shaping human resources in the technology sector. He empowers business leaders and HR professionals. He has become a visionary in skills development, offering a rich array of training, mentorship, and community-oriented programs specifically designed for the tech as well as the HR industry. So with that, I want to welcome Jeff as our first guest.
Well, thank you very much, Ron, for having me here. I'm honored to, to be your first guest, and you've trusted me to do that and sort of take on that honorable role. Thank you.
Thank you for being a good guest, man. We always like to start our conversation with leaders and talking about how did Jeff become Jeff at where you are today and starting out from university. Kind of walk us through that and give us kind of an overview.
Yeah, so my career has always been a little bit strange. I mean, it's sort of been up and down and all around, but I don't think I would have had it, any other way. So I went to business school, and I was always good with numbers, and so I thought, maybe I should go into business, and I didn't get into sciences, thank God, because I followed what my parents wanted me to do, be a doctor. And I'm like, no. So I went into business, and I loved it. But I think the biggest thing for me was that I was always doing different things. So I was in school, I was working part-time, I was involved in my sport, involved in community, and I wasn't just focused on one thing. And I think that variety and diversity really helped me in my career, sort of getting off to a good start. I think in terms of school, it was business, and I always liked that the intersection between strategy and people. There's something, there was something there, and as a young 19-year-old sort of young buck or whatever, I would, there was something about that. And when I realized it was HR, and so that, what I majored in, and I actually left Vancouver and then went to Alberta for about 3.5 years. I was working for the government as my first job. It was the best job I ever had, actually. I was traveling around the province, working with different people and visionaries, all in the trades sector, and it really, that once again, it was a diverse and variety role, and that sort of spearheaded my career. Yeah.
Mm. You said you used the term strange trajectory. And I know lots of people today are struggling. They may not see that clear path. Do you think that's a challenge with young people coming into work today, and they're looking to try to make a straight shot from here to here, and they may not be able to handle the detours or disruptions?
That's a very good point. I mean, today, the pace of business is rampant. It's rapid, it's fast, and things change often. And the same thing goes for careers. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect career path. I mean, like I have many colleagues who started as an intern, a co-op student, then went to a HR coordinator, and an HR generalist, and a director, and just kind of follows that sort of, and mine wasn't like that. There's a lot of value and power in working for different organizations, different sizes, different industries, really broadening your reach. Because look, if organizations don't need you, they're going to let you go. You need to be ready all the time. And last year was a primary example of that. I mean, I've been caught in 3 different downsizing in my career, all in a span of 3 years, so earlier, on in my career. And that was a bit eye-opening for me because I knew, but I had to be ready. And I think young people today need to be really agile, extremely flexible, always thinking about their next move, even if it's a completely different path than it might have been, say, last year or previously. So.
Yeah, you mentioned careers, and different careers sort out one thing. I know I always use the phrase, I know more lawyers that are not lawyering anymore. I know a friend of mine is an accountant. He just told me, he said, I just opened a manufacturing company in Pakistan. I said, what about the accountant? He said, yeah, we still do that, but the focus is on this because this is what I'm really passionate about.
100%. I mean, lawyers. I mean, it's sort of a classic example. I mean, I have two first cousins, that are trained lawyers that don't, don't practice law anymore, but they leverage their sort of background. And I think it's really important. I see a lot of people who have, side gigs, side hustles, they do other things that really tapped into their broader sort of skill set so they could, and I think that really important, today, and to be sort of multi-diverse, to multi-skilled, and really look at, where the opportunities are.
Yeah. So you're a branding expert. So it's starting out, when you're thinking of branding, because, that's kind of a term that's used a lot. I think it's overused, but we all are viewed as whatever the brand is. Do you think that's something that younger people, or even people who have been disrupted, should think about creating that branding structure, or just keep moving towards something?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I mean, I take a very, different approach to things. And this is sort of an overused word too, authentic. I mean, it's really hard to, not be you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, over the long term. So my advice always to people, into when the branding, themselves, or how they talk about, themselves, is to really be real. I mean, just be you. I mean, don't try to be someone that, but you're not, because over time, you're just going to fall apart, right? So the idea, but the other trick too is, you want to be perceived as a similar or same brand online, versus offline, sort of like in person. So if you meet someone in person for the first time, and they're like, oh, you're a little different, than I thought you were online. I mean, that's not a good thing. So the idea to be really consistent through all of your channels.
Yeah. So you and I have known each other online for a long time. And this is why it was exciting for me with P World. And I think P World is listening in. And they brought both of us to Toronto a couple of months ago. And I was excited to meet you. But the brand was on point with the brand that you're presenting online. So talk about that for people, because you said sometimes there could be that disconnect. And I don't want to use the word authentic, but how do we make sure we're presenting one way? And
I think getting feedback is a really good thing. I mean, I have a very close, network of people, that I'm always asking for, their feedback on. So, for example, so my website, my personal blog, how my LinkedIn is, written or presented. I mean, obviously, it's sometimes really hard for us to kind of step back, we're right in it. So then you ask people for, their feedback. The other thing too is to really articulate what your brand values are, and it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, for me, it's all about, being, brutally honest. I'm, a kind, type of person. Communicative, creative. So those are the things, that I stand by. And so everything I do, I try to align to those things. And if you can do that, then you have a higher chance of being on brand, right? So you don't have to worry about, that type of thing. So that's really what I think young people have to do. I'm a huge advocate of taking although I don't have paper in my office, well, I have like books, but I always take a blank piece of paper and I write things down, my value. Yeah. Well, I don't have one, but I have my Google Docs and whatever. But the whole idea is to get something down on paper and then to test it with your trusted, audience.
hmm hmm Yeah, I've used a lot of the tools. I use Apple Notes, but I find that when I write something down, it has a larger impact for me as
Yeah.
opposed to putting it online kind of approach.
Yeah, but some people like to write things down, like my wife is, a huge note taker on a pad of paper. See, I'm not. I'm more of a typing, kind of person. I mean, it really has to do with the person, So I always do what works best for me, and I
hmm
don't try to push that on, anyone else. I mean, if you like paper, then go with it. Right?
Okay, okay. So as you've gone through these steps with jobs, what was the impetus to say, you know what, let me try this, and I'm going to say build the brand? I don't know whether Scale HR was the first or Social Camp HR, which one, but talk me through the transition from the working life to the real working life, because as an entrepreneur, there's no 5 days a week.
No, 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 no. Yeah, I mean, people ask me, so, yeah, how were your holidays? I'm like, great. So, what do you do? Work. What? And I said, yeah, well, I mean, hey, I mean, you're running your own business, right? So this all started for me probably in 2008. So it was really interesting. The financial crisis obviously hit at that time. And I was working for a consulting firm for 2008, and I lost my job. And it would have been January 7th of 2009. And I knew at that point, that was the third time that I had lost my job in 3 years, all due to downsizing, right sizings, and so on. And so I said, you know what? I think it's time for me to start a blog.
Okay.
You have a lot of ideas in my head.
Yeah.
I want to start writing. I enjoy writing, and I started a blog. And then shortly thereafter, a bunch of my articles started to, get picked up, and then people actually, started to, encourage me just to start my own business. So I did. Um, I started doing some consulting in HR, HR consulting, leadership, and so on. And then next thing I know, where are we now? 2024. I mean, 16 years later, right? And so I've done a lot of different things. So Social HR Camp started in 2012, and all that is it's just an event that I started doing that is really hands-on learning for the HR community. And I've done over 45 of them now in the last 10 years, and
Wow.
done them in 15 cities in North America, and I'll be doing 6 this year. And so we just bring, the HR community together with some, top HR leaders in the tech space, practitioners, the recruiters, branding experts, and then the key theme for this year is going to be generative AI, which is obviously,
Yeah. The big
taking our
topic.
workplaces by storm. So, um, I do a lot of really cool things, but it all started with my blog.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3 layoffs. You got caught in the vortex 3 times,
Yeah.
but that was enough to say, let me try something else. And I know a lot of people have been caught in that same situation. What advice would you give to someone who made last week? I just read that last week that Amazon Prime is going to lay off a whole bunch of people because of the disruption in the streaming industry. What advice would you give someone who maybe has gone, this could be their first time, a second time? What should they be thinking about version 2.0, 3.0?
I I think the first thing to do is to really think about some of the learnings that you can take from the previous role. Things don't work out for various reasons, and I think the focus is always on progress, so learning. And so whether it was your fault, their fault, it doesn't matter. I mean, what can you sort of take away from it, and write it down. I mean, really, think about it and start with that so that you can do better next time around.
Mhm.
The other thing too that's a real key thing for me is my own network. I don't activate my network when I need something. It's always activated, always. It doesn't matter in times of bad times and good times. And so having a really strong network and being able to help others and add value and always nurturing it is going to help you
Wow.
hugely, right? And especially when you need something too, right? I mean, right, but you have to come from a place of helping others first. And I
Yeah.
think that I've leaned on that a lot, over the years, and I have a huge network, but that, because I'm old and I've been around for a long time. So, well, and
Relative.
yeah. But I think also too is I think people need to remind themselves too that the average tenure for most people in a organization is about 18 months, 24 months.
Mhm.
So those days of staying somewhere for 20 years, 30 years are gone. So there are lots of opportunities out there. You need to go find them. And it starts with learning, doing a debrief,
Mhm.
and then nurturing your, network.
Yeah, you mentioned the people that have been hit with that, and right of a sudden they reach out to you haven't heard from them in X amount of time, and I've been the same as you. I've been getting hit from people that I haven't heard from in years, and all of a sudden they want me to connect you to this one and that one and the other, because they didn't build it, they didn't nurture it. So I always use the concept, it's a greenhouse, and every day you've got to water it a little bit. You've got to make sure the sunlight's coming in, the nutrients are there, and when you need to harvest, you can harvest.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, it's all about about relationships, right? I mean, the relationships work both ways. There needs to be two people to tango, right? I mean, and both of them need to be sort of helping each other out. I mean, if someone like to, to your point, Ron, if you don't hear from them for 2 years, and then all of a sudden they reach out to you, and if they, just want to sort of reconnect, that's fine. That is completely okay. But if they come out, gun blazing with, I need some help, and do this and I do that, it's extremely off-putting. And I do want to help, but there are sort of circumstances where that doesn't work. I mean, a lot of people are not, very, very open to that kind of approach.
Yeah, to call the message that comes in. Let's jump on a Zoom next week for 15 minutes. I need your advice on something, and I'm like, can't do that. I'm busy next week.
Yeah, but someone in my network who was in the U.S. who told me, so what they say is, well, my hourly rate is, and you can send the money to this. I'm like, okay, well, that's a little bit harsh, but
Yeah.
but the point is that my time is, valuable, just like yours.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-way street. So let's talk about the people that institute the 3 to 4 times of right sizing. And it's I find it always amazing how these buzzwords come in. You were laid off, but we're calling it right size. We're trying to right size the ship and all of these kind of things. In the end, you lost your job. What advice would you give to senior leaders as they're approaching a decision that maybe there could be some repercussions as to how we could possibly handle that a little better? And I think someone that's gone through it 3 times, you may have some insight on that.
That's a good question. I think there's a couple of things. One is, people are always watching. They're always listening. They're always watching and, listening. And so, it's really important that, leaders, in the act of, if you're laying off, say, 10% of your workforce, et cetera, that you do so in the best way possible, because you've got your, survivors, the employees that are still there after that exercise. They're watching how you're, doing it. And if you're doing it in an empathetic, respectful, kind way, that will go a long way. Look, I mean, it's not a great outcome. I mean, when you terminate someone,
Yeah.
That's never fun, right?
Yeah.
But the employees are watching, and if you go about it in a positive, empathetic, respectful way, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that it's not just about the act of laying people off. It's what you do afterward. You've got people that went through it. I mean, I know an organization here in Toronto that went through 3 rounds last year, 3 different separate rounds of layoffs.
Wow.
And people are still there. Their morale is in the tank right now, right? And so leaders ignored that entire thing. They just thought, well, they have a job, so they should be thankful. No, it's how you make them feel. And so They really have to focus on the survivors and ensuring that they're on board, they're connected, engaged, know the strategy, all those types of things. So I think it's in the act of, but it's also going forward. It never stops. So you always have to continue communicating. So.
Yeah, I read a case this past week about an organization who was facing this, and the C-suite decided to let's just take pay cuts and see how we can stretch this out. And all of the leadership team took a huge pay cut so they wouldn't have to impact employees. But they told the employees what they were doing because they wanted to make sure that their employees were still engaged, because they thought that if they did mass, the people that were left, the survivors, were going to be impacted, productivity, all the other KPIs. And if we did it this way, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, the other part that I didn't mention too is that it's around that communication. I mean, people are feeling beings. I mean, if you don't communicate and tell people what's going on and why, they're going to they're the gossip mill. They're going to fill in the gaps with stuff, right? Whether it's factual or not. But don't forget too that I mean, everyone works in an organization are adults. So let's all treat each other like adults, right? There's no reason why that you shouldn't be hiding the reason behind certain choices that a C-suite makes. Of course, there are certain things that are confidential. Like the circumstances around, individuals and why they were terminated. But I'm talking more from a high level macro perspective strategy, as to what were the factors that actually influenced you making those choices. So, and if you don't do that, you're just shattering trust. I mean, credibility goes in the toilet. So,
yeah. I want to do a quick shout out to our frequent listeners, John Self, based out of Texas, and he's talking about mid-teens to snow on Monday morning. Jim Moy, who's my good friend out of Washington, D.C. Hajar is also here. So thank you all for commenting. Jim says, good morning from D.C. John said an excellent point on networking. The online application odds of 150 to 1 against the applicant. Interesting. So when we talk about careers of trying to find that next spot, and we've kind of tied in networking to that, what advice for someone who has been hit and now they're trying to get back on track? The odds 150 to 1. I've always said when you apply for that job online, it's like putting up your CV in a bottle, throwing it in the ocean, and hoping someone will pick it up. What advice would you? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget. Most of these jobs, there's a lot of work out there that is not posted.
Yeah,
it's not actually visible, anywhere. So job searching, when you're taking, going to job boards, company website, career sites, that's one channel. And I always look at it from a channel perspective. So you have job search, a company website, that's one channel. Maybe it's, social media, that's another channel. Third channel, networking. Okay. People, can uncover opportunities that aren't posted. It is a lot of work, yes, but most people don't do that. They sort of hinge their entire job search on postings, right? So what you're doing is, it's like a funnel, right? So, you got, say, 10,000 people applying for jobs, and those jobs might represent maybe 50% of the actual work out there. Don't forget, the one thing that people have to start realizing is that the nature of work has changed. So that permanent full-time status doesn't have to always be there. You can be a freelancer, contractor, part-time, whatever. And that's why I've hinged my sort of career on in the last 15 years is that, so what? You're a full-time permanent person. If the employer is going through some cuts, you are gone, right? So what changed? Nothing, right? So why not, put control of be open to different types of arrangements. And I think if you can tackle multi-channel job search approach, just like salespeople do, just like marketers do, you will be better off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So ScaleHR, how do you advise leaders, on finding the right people and making sure the teams are productive? So you've taken all you've gone through, you've packaged that, and now you're selling that to clients. What is the common branding theme as to how you can help an organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really focused on business outcomes, right? So it's not. As you know, Ron, leadership is not fluffy, airy, fairy, and okay. There's a real art and science to it. Is there one approach that fits all? No.
Yeah.
And to what we do is obviously in a world that's rapidly shifting from a skills gap shortage point of view. Leaders need to be multi-skilled, diverse, and agile. And so we work with those organizations to really boost their capabilities. So whether it be through coaching, mentorship, advisory, or actually putting them through actual programs that embed coaching into it. So it's a real focus on actual adoption. So only 10% of training sticks.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge problem, and especially today in our business climate. So we want to change that. We want to turn that 10% into like 90%, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a real, a different point of us.
Yeah, I always focus on that when I do well. Every leadership development program I do there's always a 1 month checkup. These checkups beyond that, because as you said, the 10%, we feel good for the 3 days we're together. Everything is good. You get back to work, work hits us, and it's kind of a diminishing return. It goes all the way down.
And that happens fast too. I did some research last year, and you lose most of it after about a week.
Yeah.
So why would you invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars on programs if you don't actually, use it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as you go through, do you see a common theme today with your clients of struggles? I know leadership development is being talked about a lot relating to post-COVID, whereas a technical person may have been great in a job post-COVID because of the virtuality and all those things. Now it's become empathy and all of these other key competencies have kind of, ramped up. Are you seeing themes?
Yeah, I am. I am seeing things. I think one of the interesting things is that people leaders are tired. They're burned out as well. And again, it's funny because employees are like, no, my manager is like a star, walks on water, and well, no, but but they still also have a family, they have a mortgage to pay, and so they're just like you. But the only difference is that they have sort of wider scope in terms of managing people. That's the first thing. So there's a lot of emphasis on personal, mental, physical, emotional wellness and well-being. And I think that's I'm seeing that a lot right now, not just staff but also leaders all the way up to the very top. And I think the other thing too is around how do you engage people, connect when you have this virtual world. And not only that, but your teams are in different time zones and also different countries. So I'm fortunate. I'm born in Canada. Canada is probably the most multicultural country on planet Earth. I grew up in Vancouver, and my core group of friends back in high school were from India, Pakistan, Hong Kong, South Africa, and I'm not the only Canadian-born person, right? So we're used to that here, but the difference now is that organizations are hiring people on team. One person could be sitting in Hong Kong, one could be in Vancouver, one could be in Toronto, one could be in Melbourne, Australia. So you're dealing with time zone issues, but also cultural things. So how they do things, and so how do managers do it when you're looking through a screen? That's really hard, really hard.
Yeah, it is hard. As you said, time zones. I was telling someone the other day, if you were to look at my Google search, the vast majority of my Google searches are aligned with convert time zone, 9 a.m. New York time to Dubai time, 9 a.m. Europe time to whatever it is. And I'm constantly trying to figure it out, putting in the calendar.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So about 3 years ago, I was working with a client. They were based out of Melbourne, Australia. So just imagine, I'm in Toronto, and like, oh my God, I think we're 16 hours behind or whatever. And so what we did was, so some of our calls we would alternate. So I'd be up at like 4 in the morning or whatever it was. I don't remember, but but that's what you do. That's what have to happen. And so I used that approach because I felt that, and then over time, I started more veering towards their time zone, and so I was up at like wee hours of the night. Anyway, but that's the reality. So.
Yeah. Welcome to my world. Next week I'm up at midnight to 4 or 5 a.m. until I get back to Dubai. You've given us a lot of wisdom. You've talked about the disruptions the 3 times. What were influences that kind of put all that together? Important influences in your life. Did you have that coach, or it could have been a grandparent, mother, father? Who was there to kind of shape it?
That's an interesting question, Ron. I never really had a mentor or a coach sort of growing up, really. But I will say, one thing that I learned both from my grandfather, who passed away, and my dad was hard work. Nobody's going to do it for you. So you own your own destiny, and so that always stuck with me. Both my brother and I are both entrepreneurs, and we didn't grow up in that environment at all. But both of us work extremely hard, and I will never waver from that. I do take time, obviously, with my family and so on, but I think for me, it was that sort of mindset, but also in the early days, I had a couple of really good managers, back in my 20s, and they really shaped my thinking and helped me. I was a gung-ho public sector employee, and they always told me just to slow down and whatever. I'm like, nope, not doing it. But they really helped me with things like listening and taking a different approach and really reading the room and things like that. So there's no one person really, Ron. Actually, I think it's just a combination.
Yeah, I love the phrase. That's my phrase that you just said. Reading the room. The importance of reading a room and picking up signals. Oh, that was always one thing for me, because my father always told me, he says, you learn more by being quiet than you do by just talking all the time. Just sit back and listen, see who's talking, see who's always never on point, and see who's quiet. And that always kind of stuck with me. And I'm always watching. When we were in Toronto a while back, I'm watching the room as you were leading the panels, because Jeff led all the panel discussions. I was the MC, but I was watching the room. I was looking to see who was asking questions. And that's a key point. Expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really key thing. One thing about me is I'm hard of hearing, and so I was born with the hearing loss. And so people who go through something like that have to deal with that like on a daily basis, start to develop other senses. And so for me, it's about body language. And so it's just something that I've sort of built up over my sort of 45 years of being on planet Earth, is that when you read the room, you can tell based on how people are looking and feeling, and if they're looking at their phone, if they're slouching over, not asking questions, sort of staring at you with a lot of different cues. And I think that that's really important, is to be socially aware. It's not easy. It's hard, but to to your point, I think when you are doing things like that, whether in an organization, in a boardroom setting, or in a virtual setting, if people start shutting off their cameras and you're the only one speaking, well, there's something going on there, right? So you have to kind of pivot and sort of be agile in your sort of approach.
Mm-hmm. So you've become an advocate of disabilities, and you mentioned hard of hearing. Talk about how that guided you as a kid coming up and even getting to where you are today.
So it's an interesting, it's a pretty interesting question. I've been asked many times. I wouldn't have it, any other way. I mean, I was born with a very severe, hearing loss. I wear hearing aids, and I also do, speech reading, so to, read lips and so on. My disability has shaped me. Basically, I mean, it turned me into sort of who I am because I've, developed some skills that are very transferable to, work, which is, creativity. I mean, I have to be very creative in sort of how I, can actually communicate with people, because if I can't really hear them outright, so there's creativity, courage. I mean, it's hard. It takes a lot of courage to sort of go into a room knowing that I may not actually hear everything, and I don't want to be that sort of sore thumb sticking out. A lot of resilient problem solving and so on. And I think for me it was it took me a while to kind of open up a little bit and be sort of at peace with the fact that I have this disability, and to be open about it. And I think in the last probably 10 years or so, it's been a lot more comfortable for me, socially acceptable, people asking, genuine questions and so on. And now, today it's much more acceptable. And hey, look, 15% of our world population live with a disability. So over 1 billion people. We are the largest minority on planet Earth.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And we represent trillions of dollars of spending power. So why do you think tech companies now are starting to build like accessible technology, or the experience on your phone have to be accessible for people who can't see, maybe they can't hear, so they have to have transcription. I mean, technology has been like a godsend for me. I mean, video technology has been awesome. So it's a huge business opportunity, but it's also, for me personally, it's really shaped me to being me. So.
Yeah, a friend of mine started an organization in Pakistan called Deaf Pakistan, and talking to how he started this was because he and his wife had a child, and the child was born deaf. He went to the government agencies and see what they had. There was nothing in the entire country of Pakistan for kids that were born deaf, and he created a program. He and his wife, in their house, started a program. Other people heard about it. The government came in, funding it. All of this came about. Now he has 300 to 400 employees, and they're looking to expand that across. I'm going to connect you to him because there's interesting connecting points there. So you're looking at a situation that could be viewed as a deficit, and you just flipped it and said, "This is how I'm going to max this out."
Well, 100%. And look, I've also leveraged it when it comes to job search too. So back in the day when I was looking for a job, I mean, people always ask you, the old question is, so what are some of your weaknesses or areas of opportunity? I go, well, I don't hear very well, but and then it flipped, and I flip it around, and when I talk about, but this is what it taught me, and this is what I've gained, this is what I've created, all these things, and that becomes a really sort of valuable point. And so I think in this case here, I mean it's important to own it, because most disabilities are not actually visible. So if you look at the sort of iceberg analogy, you've got the iceberg, and maybe say 20% is visible, so above the waterline, and then 80% is sort of hidden. Right. That's the same thing, right? So you could have 10 people in the room, all 10, just by looking at them, you wouldn't even know that, one could be, have, Down syndrome, one could, be hard of hearing, one could be deaf, one could be suffering from, Lyme disease. Like, there's a whole host of things that you wouldn't really know. So I think, but it's important for people to own it.
Yeah.
why not own it? Look,
So I think social media is like that, because social media is the iceberg theory. You see all these cool things people are doing, and you never get a chance to see below that 80% that's percolating under there. And I'll use an example of this: entrepreneurs. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but as you
Yeah.
said, I worked the entire weekend. I did the same thing. And when you have a job Monday through Friday, you kind of clock it up until Sunday night or Monday morning, you start over again. But that
Right.
80%.
And people always say to me, "Oh, Jeff, you've built a great career, highly successful career, and you might be doing really well." And I'm like, "You have no idea." I said, 2023 was a horrible year for a lot of people. It was a tough year, and I pivoted my company, and I knew that it was the right time to do it, but financially, it was horrible, right? But I knew that I had to do it, right? But people have no clue, so.
They don't. One other last question before we begin the process of closing out. What was the most important leadership lesson you've learned? If you look back at all of this, can you encapsulate that into one lesson that was, or maybe a few, that was important, and it's kind of a guiding anchor, as you move forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've always taken the approach that leadership is a relationship. It's not a transaction, right? So I think a lot of people, there's a difference between leadership and then say management. And so, you have different leadership styles, but the one for me that really is the most effective is when the actual leader gets to know the employees on a personal level and a deeper level, and they treat it like a relationship. And I'm not talking about interpersonal relationship. I'm talking about a working relationship, versus it being transactional, like run, do this, do that, and you never talk to each other. So I think that to me is the core anchor. And so everyone who's worked for me and with me, I treat them just like a regular human being. I mean, the only difference is that I have a bit, broader scope in my line of sight to the top, or whatever the case may be. And my scope is broader, but that's it, really. So.
Yeah. Well, would you consider that as being authentic? Authentic means I'm trying to learn about Jeff as a whole person and what Jeff's life is like beyond the 9 to 5. So let's do a 360 relationship kind of approach.
Absolutely, because don't forget, I mean, people still believe that you can turn work off and from your personal life. But the thing is that, the things that are in your personal life, really impact, you at work. And, I mean, obviously, I mean, if you're going through a divorce or a rough time or what have you, I mean, that's going to impact every aspect of your emotional psyche and being. And so, it's really important for leaders to be empathetic and to be constantly watching and listening and asking questions. And it's not to be nosy. It's just because they genuinely care.
Yeah, because they genuinely care. You know what? One of the goals of the show as we close out is to bring a platform for leaders like yourselves to discuss career journey, talk about the entire 100% of the iceberg, as opposed to just the 20 piece that we brand you as. And today, thankfully, you kicked it off for 2024 for us, and we appreciate that. Any takeaways you want to give to the audience before we begin the process of closing out?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously for those, who manage people, it is a lifelong journey to be that awesome, leader. If you think don't go to Google and type in, leadership approach and then try to, I mean, you have to have a basis, like a model to leverage, but make it yours. And I think, really it's about, getting to know your people personally and to really understand what makes them tick. Because look, I mean, what worked for one person won't work for the next, right? And so I think from a career perspective, the thing there is the world's constantly changing. You need to be all over it. You need to be on top of the current trends and changes, and you need to be ready. And if that means building a side gig, go for it. Because quite frankly, you need to be responsible for yourself and your family. So,
CEO of you.
CEO of you. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some great people out there that I know that are doing work for a company, and then they've got an awesome side gig and they plan to transition out of it. But your path is sort of your path. It's not going to be like a straight line upwards. It's going to be some combination of up and down and squiggly and all the rest of it, right? So,
okay, cool. Jeff, thank you, man. Thank you for being a guest and kicking off 2024 for us. And I will be in touch. I need you to hold on because some things I want to talk to you about. So as we close out. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, and thank everyone for being here. And I hope to run into you somewhere, maybe around the world somewhere. Maybe we'll meet somewhere.
But love that. Okay, cool.
All right.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.